Let's go back in time. It's the Great Depression, and Cleveland is already dealing with so much poverty and despair. But then, a new kind of terror starts stalking the streets. A killer so brutal, so methodical, and so good at disappearing, he would become one of America's most infamous phantom criminals.
And that's the big question, isn't it? How does someone butcher at least 13 people and then just vanish? We're talking about a phantom who decapitated and dismembered his victims with what seemed like surgical precision, who taunted the most famous lawman in the country and then just disappeared. Poof, gone.
So to really get what was going on, you have to picture Cleveland in the 1930s. The city was on its knees, and in its darkest corners, a predator found the absolute perfect hunting ground.
And boy, did he get a chilling name that would echo through the city's nightmares: the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. His horrifying and, officially, unsolved murders would absolutely paralyze Cleveland, creating this legend of fear that, honestly, is still around to this day.
And this was his turf. Kingsbury Run wasn't just a place on a map. It was a symptom of the Great Depression. This gully was a maze of shanty towns, packed with drifters and the poor. These folks were transient, they were isolated, and, tragically, that made them the perfect victims. People that society had pretty much already forgotten.
Now, this was no ordinary killer. The Mad Butcher had this specific, really gruesome ritual that left no doubt when a body was his work. It was this terrifying consistency that gave investigators their only real clues.
Okay, so his MO was horrific. He almost always beheaded his victims, and there's evidence it was often while they were still alive. He dismembered their bodies with a skill that really suggested he knew anatomy, and he'd sometimes treat the skin with chemicals. And here's the final frustrating twist for the police. The heads were almost never found, making it nearly impossible to identify who these people were.
13. That is the official number of victims. 13 lives taken, dismembered, and scattered across Cleveland. That number alone marks this as one of the most intense serial killing sprees in all of American history.
So, with the city in a full-blown panic and the body count just climbing and climbing, Cleveland turned to its celebrity lawman. The man who famously took down Al Capone was now facing a monster of a completely different kind.
That's right. Eliot Ness. The guy's reputation was legendary. As public safety director, he was the top cop. The public thought, if anyone can get this guy, it's Ness. But this case, with its phantom killer and total lack of evidence, would challenge him like nothing else before. And honestly, it would end up haunting his career.
You can just feel Ness's frustration growing with every new body. Finally, he makes this desperate, super controversial move. He orders the complete destruction of the Kingsbury Run shantytowns, burns them to the ground, to try and flush out the killer. And the killer's response? Absolutely chilling. He gets even bolder, leaving his last two victims right out on the lakefront, in direct sight of Eliot Ness's office. A total act of defiance.
You know, amid all the headlines about the killer and the famous detective, it's easy to lose sight of the real tragedy here. The people who actually lost their lives. They weren't just numbers in a case file, they were human beings. And this table really shows the true heartbreak of this case. Out of all the official victims, only 3 were ever positively identified. The rest are still John and Jane Does. It's just powerful proof that the killer preyed on the invisible, people whose disappearance might not even be noticed for weeks, or months, or maybe ever.
But believe it or not, the story isn't entirely over. Just this year, a brand new effort started. The DNA Doe Project has actually begun exhuming the unidentified victims. Using modern science, they hope to finally solve the oldest mystery of this case. Not just who the killer was, but who his victims were.
So while modern science is trying to give the victims their names back, let's jump back to the 1930s. Eliot Ness was consumed with a different question. The investigation wasn't a complete dead end, and he closed in on one man who stood out from all the others. A man with the skills, the opportunity, and maybe the demons to be the butcher.
Now, at first, police arrested a guy named Frank Dolezal. He even confessed, but he later died under really suspicious circumstances in a cell and was eventually cleared. But Eliot Ness, his primary suspect, was a man named Dr. Francis Sweeney. Sweeney was a surgeon who'd served in World War I, conducting amputations. He was also a severe alcoholic who just happened to live and work right near Kingsbury Run. The circumstantial evidence, well, it was starting to pile up. Okay, the case against Sweeney was seriously compelling. He had the surgical skills from the war, he failed two polygraph tests, and here's the kicker. The very moment he voluntarily committed himself to a mental institution, the murders stopped. Just stopped. And for years afterward, until the day he died, he would mail these menacing postcards to Ness and his family, just constantly taunting him.
So if Eliot Ness was so sure it was Sweeney, why did the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run get away with it? Well, the answer really lies in the limits of science back then and the power of politics.
At the end of the day, Ness had a powerful suspect, but no smoking gun. There was zero direct physical evidence linking Sweeney to the crimes. And to make things worse, Sweeney's first cousin was a powerful U.S. congressman who was also a huge political enemy of Ness. Trying to prosecute him would have been a political nightmare with a very, very uncertain outcome.
And get this, the mystery might not even end in Cleveland. Some investigators, including the lead detective on the case, believe the butcher was responsible for other, very similar dismemberment murders in Pennsylvania and other places. They often found bodies in boxcars along the railways that connected the states. The true victim count could actually be much, much higher.
And so here we are, left with the exact same question that baffled Eliot Ness. Was the killer a brilliant but deranged surgeon hiding in plain sight? Or was he some nameless drifter riding the rails and killing as he went? The truth is, the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run remains exactly what he was back in the 1930s, a terrifying, unidentified phantom in the history of American crime.